Letting go isn't failure. It's the moment life starts to bloom. There's a strange paradox in life. Many people only begin to see things clearly after they let go. And I don't mean letting go out of desperation. I mean letting go with awareness, with peace. No longer gripping so tightly, no longer trying to control or fix the past. And then, like a gentle breeze, everything slowly falls into place. Have you ever felt that way? That strange lightness when you stop trying to make everything perfect and suddenly a quiet kind of peace starts to appear? The harder we try to control life, the more we lose ourselves. But when we loosen our grip, we find our center again. We grow up with this belief. If we try hard enough, work long enough, we can make life go our way. But the Buddha taught that clinging attachmentus, the root of suffering. Like holding a handful of sand, the tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. Maybe you've felt this before, worrying about everything, trying to manage every detail only to end up exhausted, empty. Control seems like power, but sometimes it's just an invisible cage trapping the soul. Peace doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from realizing you don't need to. There are mornings when we wake up already spinning, thinking about what we have to do, who we have to become. We push so hard that we forget we're even alive. But in a quiet moment sitting by a window, or simply washing dishes in mindfulness, we catch a glimpse of something deeper, a knowing that we don't need to do more to be enough. That enoughness is already there, if only we pause and listen. Not more action, but less striving. Not chasing more, but letting go to come home. Life doesn't always need to be held so tightly. Sometimes, a gentle release is what opens the door to clarity. And from that moment, the journey of awakening truly begins. 1. Letting go is a superpower. There's a truth few people recognize early in life. Real strength doesn't always come from pushing through. Sometimes it comes from knowing when to release. Not giving up, not running away, but letting go with full awareness, like a boat that knows when it's time to stop rowing against the current and let the water carry it forward. Many people believe that if they don't hold on tightly, if they don't control every piece, everything will fall apart. But it's because they hold on so tightly that they end up worn out, wounded, and disconnected from the natural flow of life. I once met a woman in her 50s during a weekend meditation retreat. Her face was filled with worry. She shared how she'd spent over 20 years trying to hold her marriage together for the kids, for her parents, for the image of a perfect family. She sacrificed. She suppressed her feelings. She tried to keep everything from falling apart. But the more she held on, the more she lost herself. And one day, when there was nothing left to hold on to, she let go. Not out of anger, but because her heart finally saw the truth. One hand cannot clap on its own, and a soul cannot breathe when it's constantly carrying the weight of everyone else. The day she let go was the day she started breathing again, deeply, and living truthfully. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, "There is no path to peace that does not pass through letting go." We only begin to live when we stop trying to control everything. Imagine a river flowing. If you keep fighting against it, you wear yourself down. But if you set the paddle down, ground yourself, and let the river carry you, you still move forward, just with less struggle and more grace. Letting go works like that. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you steady because you're no longer driven by fear, expectation, or the past. There's a Zen story of an old warrior, a man who had conquered many battles. In old age, he sought out a Zen master and said, "I've learned how to fight, but I never learned how to put down my sword." The master didn't say a word. He simply handed him a cup of tea and smiled. When your hands are full of swords, you can't receive anything. Only when the warrior laid the sword down empty-handed could he accept his first true cup of presence. In modern life, we're taught to never give up, but no one teaches us how to know when to pause, when to surrender. Sometimes, what you're holding on to is the very thing that's holding you back. Maybe it's an outdated dream. Maybe it's a broken relationship. Or maybe it's a version of yourself that no longer fits who you're becoming. Letting go isn't about losing. It's about making space for something new to arrive. That space, sometimes, is exactly what your soul has been waiting for. So if there's something you're gripping tightly right now, ask yourself, am I holding on because of love or because of fear? And if it's fear, maybe it's time to set it down gently. You might be surprised. Things won't fall apart. They might just fall into place. 2. You are not your thoughts. Have you ever felt like one tiny thought could ruin your entire day? A harsh comment from a stranger, a careless remark from someone you love, or maybe an old memory creeping back late at night and suddenly it takes over your entire mind. Most of us grow up believing, if I think it, it must be true. But that is one of the biggest illusions we carry. In Buddhist teachings, the mind is often compared to the vast sky. Thoughts are just clouds passing through. Some days, the sky is clear. Other days, thick clouds roll in. But no matter what, the sky never disappears. It's still there, quiet, steady, spacious. The problem is, we don't live like the sky. We live like the clouds. We cling to every passing thought. I'm not good enough. They don't love me. I've made too many mistakes. These thoughts aren't facts. They're habits, mental patterns shaped by past pain, old stories, and beliefs we've never really questioned. A Zen master once asked his student, "If a bird flies by and cries out, does the sky get blamed for the noise?" The student replied, "No, master, the sky did nothing wrong." The teacher smiled. "Then why do you let one passing thought define you as if that's all you are?" If you've ever meditated deeply, that question lands in a very real way. After more than 30 years guiding meditation and listening to the hearts of spiritual seekers, one truth has stood out. So much suffering comes from believing our fleeting thoughts and turning them into permanent stories about who we are. I remember a middle-aged man who spoke after a silent retreat. He said, "I realized I've spent years letting my father's words, 'we're a failure,' live in my head, like a soundtrack I never questioned. And every day, I listened to it as if it were the truth. No one else needed to put him down anymore. He had built a prison inside his own mind and locked himself in. But here's the liberating truth. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening to it. And when you realize that, something opens up inside. A space, a breath, the space of mindfulness, the space of awareness, where you don't need to react so quickly, where you don't have to fight every negative thought. You simply watch it like a cloud. It comes and it goes. The Buddha didn't teach us to destroy our thoughts. He taught us to see them clearly for what they are, impermanent, not solid, not self. He taught us to sit beside the river of the mind, not to jump in, not to get swept away, but just to observe. And the miracle is this. When we stop being ruled by our thoughts, we begin to touch a deeper part of ourselves, a place of stillness, of clarity, of strength, a place that doesn't need praise, that doesn't fear judgment, that doesn't crave to be seen or understood. That is your true nature, your awakened mind. So, if there's ever a day when your mind feels stormy, if a single thought feels like it's dragging you down like a strong wind, pause, take a deep breath, and whisper to yourself, "This is just a thought. It is not me." Then let it go. Even if you do that for just a few minutes a day, you'll begin to notice something simple but powerful. Peace doesn't come from controlling your thoughts. It comes from no longer identifying with them. 3. The whatever mindset is inner strength in disguise. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from having everything go your way. It comes from learning how to stay grounded even when life feels completely out of control. A lot of people hear the phrase, "whatever mindset," and think it means apathy, like you don't care. But actually, it can be a form of deep wisdom, a quiet strength that shows up only after the heart has weathered many storms and has finally learned you don't have to react to everything that happens. Whatever doesn't mean giving up. It means understanding this simple truth: not everything deserves your energy. I remember a man in his 40s who came up to me after a Dharma talk. He asked, "Why do I get so angry when things don't go my way? I lose my temper when someone speaks harshly to me. I panic when work doesn't go as planned. How can I stop being pulled into all of it?" That question isn't just his. It's the question of so many of us living in a world full of pressure, expectations, and very little breathing room. In the Buddhist teachings, there's a beautiful image. A mountain in the middle of a storm. The winds may blow, the clouds may gather, the thunder may roar, but the mountain remains still. And so it is with the awakened mind. When someone criticizes, you don't immediately lash back. When a door closes, you don't collapse in despair. When life doesn't go as planned, you don't fall apart. Not because you're numb, but because you've learned to stop letting emotions run your life. You've created space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space is your freedom. In guiding many students through mindfulness and meditation, I've seen this truth again and again. The more someone tries to control everything, the more exhausted they become. Because sometimes the real skill isn't making things go right. It's staying centered when everything feels wrong. A woman once shared after a weekend retreat, "I spent most of my life trying to keep everything perfect, raising my kids, holding the family together, keeping the peace. But the more I tried, the smaller I felt. One day, I just whispered to myself, 'Whatever,' and I broke down in tears. But they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of someone who could finally breathe again." The whatever mindset isn't carelessness. It's knowing what's worth holding on to and what you can let pass. Like someone meditating beside a river. The leaves float by, the water gets muddy. Then it clears again. Everything is seen, everything is felt. But there's no need to jump in and fix every ripple. The Buddha once said, "If someone throws insults at you, you don't have to accept them. If you don't receive them, they return to the sender." In the same way, if life sends you wind, rain, or thunder, you don't need to fight it all. Just stay steady. Like a mountain, like a quiet lake, like the sky that remains no matter how many clouds drift by. Maybe today things aren't going your way. Someone misunderstood you. A job fell through. A dream just shattered. But if you can pause, take a deep breath, and say in your heart, "Whatever happens, I remain." Then right therein, that one moment, your inner strength has awakened. Peace isn't the absence of storms. It's when you're no longer afraid of the storm. And that strength doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from choosing presence over reaction. 4. Letting go of the need for validation. One of the most subtle forms of slavery in our modern lives isn't material. It's not even about work. It's the quiet dependency on how others see us, the craving to be recognized, applauded, and approved just to feel like we matter. From a young age, many of us are trained to live for approval, do well to be praised, be obedient to be loved, achieve something to feel seen. And so, our very sense of existence gets entangled in external eyes. As we grow older, we carry that mask into the world. We work hard, not always from passion, but because we want to be noticed. We hold on to relationships not out of love, but out of fear of being forgotten. We share beautiful thoughts, not always to inspire, but to be liked. And somewhere along the way, we forget who we really are, because we've lived too long playing the part of someone being judged. The Buddha once said, "A wise person is not shaken by praise, nor broken by criticism like a solid rock in the storm. They live rooted in truth within, not the echoes outside. And only when we let go of the need to be recognized does true freedom begin." I once met a man in his 50s, a former CEO of a major company who stepped away from his career and spent a few weeks at a monastery after a personal crisis. He shared, "I used to think I was successful because people admired me, respected me. But when my company went through a downturn and the phone stopped ringing, I started questioning my own worth." He paused, then said something I'll never forget. "I realized I wasn't really living. I was performing, just trying to be someone worthy of praise." And his story is not rare. So many people are quietly exhausted from living in the spotlight of others' opinions. But what if, one day, you stopped chasing approval? What if there were no claps, no compliments, no nods of agreement? Would you still walk the path you're on? That question might seem simple, but it holds a kind of freedom most people never taste. Because when your actions come not from the need to be validated, but from being honest with yourself, every step feels lighter. No more performing. No more comparing. No more proving. At a small Dharma talk in California, a young woman once shared, "I often post positive quotes and pretty pictures online, but I noticed I feel empty if no one likes them." Then her voice cracked, "Because I've been measuring my self-worth by engagement." That's the reality for so many today. Not because we're shallow, but because the mind has gotten hooked on a new addiction: external validation. But the Buddha taught that true happiness doesn't come from what others say about us. It comes from knowing who we are and living in alignment with that truth, even if no one sees it. Yes, there will be times you're misunderstood. Your quiet efforts may go unrecognized, but that doesn't make you any less worthy. Truth doesn't need applause to be truth, and an honest heart doesn't need praise to feel whole. You weren't born to please the world. You were born to live deeply and truthfully with yourself. So if there's something you're doing just to be noticed, pause for a moment and ask yourself, if no one saw this, would I still do it? If the answer is yes, then you're walking your path. And on that path, even without a spotlight, you'll find peace. Because once you stop chasing the gaze of the world, you'll start to see something far more precious. Not applause, but genuine connection. Not attention, but silence where you can finally meet yourself, unburdened by expectations or illusions. 5. Non-attachment. When letting go brings everything into place. There's something strange about life. The more we try to control the outcome, the more tangled things get. But when we finally let go, really let goof expectations, what needs to come often comes. In its own way, at the right time, and often in ways we never imagined. It's not luck. It's because life has its own wisdom, deeper than anything our little ego could ever script. In Buddhism, this is called non-attachment. It doesn't mean we don't care. It means our heart isn't stuck to the outcome. Like a gardener, you plant the seed, tend the soil, water with care, but you can't force the flower to bloom on your schedule. Your role is to sow the right seeds. Blooming? That's nature's job. A woman in her 60s once shared her story with me. For nearly 10 years, she prayed day and night for her son to change, to quit drinking, to live a better life. She tried everything: words, sacrifice, tears. But nothing worked. Things only got worse. Then one day she said, "I stopped asking for anything. I just loved him quietly and lived my own life the best I could." Strangely enough, it was after she released all her expectations that her son slowly began to change. Not because she stopped caring, but because her love no longer came with conditions. In working with many mature Buddhists over the years, one thing becomes very clear. The greatest pressure doesn't come from life itself, but from the expectations we cling to, expecting others to understand us, expecting our plans to succeed, expecting that if we do good, life must reward us. But when life doesn't follow our script, we get angry, we get hurt, we feel disappointed. Sometimes, we even blame ourselves or fate. But the Buddha taught, attachment to results is the root of suffering. Act without being bound by expectations. That is the path of the wise. The wise aren't passive. They still take action, but from clarity, not from desperation. That's why their steps are lighter, freer. No matter what the result, they keep their inner peace. There's a powerful meditation used in many monasteries. Before doing something, ask yourself, if this doesn't turn out the way I hope, would I still do it? If the answer is yes, you're acting from strength, from truth, not from fear or craving or pressure. And here's the beautiful thing. The actions we take without clinging often yield the sweetest fruit. During a retreat for entrepreneurs in Seattle, a man shared his story. He had pushed himself for years trying to make his startup succeed, to get that high valuation, the big investors. But the harder he pushed, the more lost he felt. It wasn't until he let go of the external benchmarks and focused instead on building something he truly believed in that things began to shift. He said, "When I stopped needing others to validate my work, people started noticing it on their own." Life isn't playing tricks. It's just that when we stop forcing things, they start to flow more naturally. So if you feel like you've tried everything, but the results just aren't coming, maybe the question isn't, what am I doing wrong? But rather, am I gripping too tightly to how I think it should go? And if you can, take one deep breath. Loosen that grip. You might just see everything starts falling into place. Not because you controlled it, but because you allowed life to unfold with its own quiet wisdom. 6. Overthinking is the enemy of inner peace. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work, doesn't come from other people, but from a mind that just won't stop. Have you ever felt that? It's late at night. Your body is tired, but your mind keeps spinning like an old ticking clock that won't quiet down. You think about the past. You think about what hasn't happened yet. You even think about how to think less. and end up thinking more. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful metaphor. The mind is like a pond. When stirred, the water gets cloudy, but when left still, it clears, and you can see all the way to the bottom. The same is true for the mind. The more we try to think our way through everything, the more tangled things become. But when we truly stop in awareness, clarity begins to quietly rise. There was a middle-aged woman who once shared this after a morning meditation. I overthink even the smallest things. Sometimes, just one vague comment from someone keeps me up all night analyzing, over-interpreting, blaming myself until by morning, I'm completely drained. She paused for a moment, then added, "But then I learned to just sit with the feeling. No analysis, no trying to understand it, just sit. And strangely, it softens on its own." She didn't find the answer through thinking. She found it through silence. The Buddha never said you have to think your way to enlightenment. He taught, observe your thoughts but don't get pulled by them. Mindfulness doesn't come from endless loops of reasoning. It comes when the mind stops, like a pond, finally still. And in that stillness, true insight can emerge. Many people confuse thinking with wisdom. They believe if they analyze long enough, they'll find the solution. But it's like stirring muddy water to see the moon's reflection. The more you stir, the more broken the reflection becomes. In years of guiding meditation, I've seen this over and over. The right decision rarely shows up after 100 rounds of mental debate. It shows up after a pause, a breath, a moment of sitting still and letting the mind rearrange itself. Think about the times you've had your clearest insights. They probably didn't come while you were anxious in your office or stressed out staring at a screen. Maybe they came while walking alone in the park, washing dishes in silence, or even in the shower. Because when the mind isn't being forced to think, wisdom has a chance to slip in. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught, contemplate the mind within the mind. Contemplate the Dharma within the Dharma. Not to control, not to analyze, but simply to see. And it's in that seeing free from pressure that truth begins to unfold. There was a 60-something-year-old man, a retired physician, who said this after a winter retreat. All my life I solved problems. But some problems don't need fixing. They just need to be seen with stillness. It sounds simple, but for someone who spent decades in analytical thinking, that moment was a deep shift. So if your mind feels tight right now, if your thoughts are dragging you from one worry to the next, try pausing for just a moment. You don't need to figure it all out. You don't need to fix anything. Just sit, breathe in, breathe out, and simply be here with yourself. Not to get rid of the thoughts, but to realize you are not those thoughts. The mind is like a machine. If it never stops, it will overheat. But we are not the machine. We are the one who watches it. And when we watch with mindfulness, we finally step out of the exhausting loop of think more, and burn out. 7. Silence is one of the highest forms of wisdom. There are some things in life that the more we talk about them, the further we drift from the truth. And there are insights so deep, they only show up when the mind has truly quieted down. We live in a world full of noise. Everyone has something to say. Everything's being shared, posted, commented on, debated nonstop. But in the midst of all this noise, genuine silence has become rare. I'm not talking about silence because someone has nothing to say. I'm talking about the kind of silence that comes from seeing clearly, so clearly that there's nothing left to add. There was a moment when someone once asked a Zen master, "Master, what is the essence of practice?" The monk didn't reply right away. Instead, he invited the person to sit beside him at the doorstep, where the early sunlight poured across the ground. They sat there quietly for a long while. Just the sound of birds, the whisper of wind, the rhythm of their own breath. Then, the monk smiled gently and said, "Practice is sitting still and seeing clearly. No need to say anything." And the man didn't ask any more questions. Not because he had none left, but because the real answer had already arrived. In the space between words, there's a story in the scriptures where the Buddha stayed silent when asked about the ultimate nature of the universe. The questioner was puzzled, but later his disciples came to understand. Sometimes the Buddha's silence was the most truthful response, because some truths go beyond language. And language, no matter how refined, is just a boat to cross the river. It's not the river itself. In real life, sometimes silence between two people is the deepest kind of communication. A look, a hand gently held, a presence without judgment, that can bring more healing than 1,000 well-meant words. Through years of listening to seasoned practitioners, especially those going through grief, loss, or unspoken pain, one thing is clear. What people often need most isn't an answer. It's a quiet space where they can simply be themselves. There was a man who came to a monastery a year after his wife passed away. He said, "I heard so many encouraging words. Everyone told me to be strong, to move on. But what helped me the most was one day when a nun just sat next to me without saying a word. And for the first time in months, I could finally cry." It wasn't what she said. It was her silence that created a safe space. A space where his pain could be present without being dismissed or fixed. In this age of noise and endless opinions, the one who chooses silence is not weak. They are someone who understands they don't need to win an argument to know their truth. They don't need to speak just to fill the space. They care enough to know that sometimes saying nothing is the greatest gift they can give. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, speaking at the right time is wise, but being silent at the right time, that's even wiser, because silence isn't absence. It's a form of wisdom, a quiet clarity that doesn't need to show off, a compassion that doesn't need fancy words. So, if one day you feel the urge to react, to say something quickly, pause. Try silence. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you're giving yourself a chance to see more clearly. Silence isn't avoidance. It's where the mind finally settles. And in that stillness, wisdom rises like the moon in a dark sky. Maybe you're in a season of life that feels chaotic, where everyone expects you to speak, to explain, to be strong. But you don't have to do all of that right now. Maybe your silence is the most courageous thing you can offer, and the most profound kind of healing you can give. 8. Let the moment lead the way. Life isn't some perfectly drawn map. It's more like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes wild, but always flowing in ways we didn't expect. And maybe what exhausts us most isn't the river itself, but the constant effort to force it to flow our way. We're taught from a young age, you've got to have a plan, you need to know where you're going, you must stay in control of the path. But in reality, the most profound moments, the biggest turning points, rarely go according to plan. There was a woman in her early 50s who came to the monastery. She had just lost her job completely out of the blue. She said, "I had planned out the whole year. Everything was on track until the company shut down. Suddenly, I felt empty, lost. She paused for a moment, then added, "But a few weeks later, on a quiet morning walk in the park, I felt this strange sense of peace. There was nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to control. And in that space of not knowing, I started to see a new path." The Buddha once said, "The past is gone. The future hasn't arrived. Live fully in the present." Because only in the present does life actually speak to us. Only in this moment can we truly listen. One of the most powerful lessons in spiritual practice is learning to stop pulling life to fit our blueprint, and instead begin listening to it like you would listen to a wise friend. Listening not with your ears, but with your presence. Listening not to react, but to truly understand what life is showing you. Think back to the moments when you felt the most peace. It probably wasn't when you were chasing a to-do list. It was when you were fully there in the moment. Maybe watching clouds drift past your window, washing dishes in silence, or just sitting beside someone you love without needing to say a word. Those are the moments that guide us. Quiet, unflashy, but powerful enough to turn the compass of your heart. During a retreat in Oregon, someone asked a monk, "How do I know which decision is the right one?" The monk simply smiled and said, "Don't rush to decide. Pause. Listen to what this moment is inviting you toward." Life knows more than we think, but it only whispers, never shouts. It sounds simple, but it reveals something deep. Only when the mind is still can we hear the quiet guidance of now. A mindful person isn't someone who knows the future. They're someone who's grounded enough to take each step with curiosity and an open heart, not dragging life to follow their script, but letting each moment take them by the hand, not rushing to fix every uncomfortable feeling, not needing to label everything right away, but choosing to stay fully with what's here. Maybe today, you don't know where you're headed. Maybe you don't have all the answers. Maybe nothing feels clear. And you know what? That's okay. Life doesn't ask you to figure it all out. It just asks you to show up wholeheartedly, one step at a time. And when you let the moment lead the way, you stop dragging life forward with sheer willpower. Instead, you begin to move with life as if you were invited to join the sacred rhythm of the universe, where everything comes and goes, like a divine song. No need to force the beat, no need to control the flow. Just listen. 9. Embracing uncertainty, groundlessness. There's something we all know, but very few of us like to face. Life is uncertain. No job is guaranteed forever. No relationship is unchanging. No plan can predict the future with total accuracy. Everything shifts. Everything changes. In the Buddha's teachings, this is called anicca, impermanence. All conditioned things are unstable. And because they're unstable, we often feel unsettled. We want something solid to hold on to. A person, a title, a clear roadmap. Anything to convince ourselves, I've got this under control. But when life suddenly turns, we panic. There was a middle-aged man who came to the meditation center after losing his home in a fire. He said, "In just a few hours, everything I thought was my stable life turned to ashes. Not just the house, but my sense of security inside." He sat quietly for a long time, then softly added, "But after a few weeks of having nothing left to hold on to, I actually started to feel lighter. Nothing to lose, and nothing left to pretend." It sounds ironic, but it's true. When there's nothing left to cling to, you start to discover what's real beneath it all. The Buddha never promised us a stable life. He taught us how to stay present within the instability, not by clinging, not by freaking out, but by learning how to embrace groundlessness with trust and softness. In meditation, this state is called groundlessness, that feeling of having no solid ground to stand on, no guaranteed footing. And yet, in that very place, you learn how to breathe, how to stand steady from within, how to release the need to be sure. At a Dharma talk once, someone asked, "How can I feel at peace when life is full of risk and change?" An old monk smiled gently and said, "Peace doesn't come when everything stops changing. It comes when you stop needing everything to stop changing. That answer, if you let it sink, in can calm an inner storm." Because real strength isn't about locking life into place. It's about sitting still in the middle of the storm and not being swept away. Not because life out there is steady, but because you found something unshakable in here. So, if you ever feel like you're floating, unsure of the future, unsure what's right or wrong, please know this: you're not alone. We've all been there. And it's often from that very groundless place that the deepest transformation begins. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need the perfect map. All you need is to be present. Just breathe. Feel each step, even if the ground beneath you doesn't feel familiar yet. And slowly, step by step, trust will grow. Because true freedom doesn't come from clinging. It comes from your ability to open your hands and still stand tall, to smile even when nothing is certain, to hold impermanence like an old friend. 10. When love becomes control. There's a kind of love that looks like care, sacrifice, and deep devotion. But if you look closer, it's not always love. Sometimes it's attachment in disguise. And even if it comes from good intentions, that attachment can become suffocating for the other person and exhausting for you. In life, many people love with all their heart. They love their children so much, they try to protect them from everything. They love their partner so deeply that even a bit of distance feels unbearable. They love their friends so much that they worry for them, hurt for them, even decide for them. It might look like genuine love on the surface, but when you're gripping tightly out of fear of losing someone, is that still love? Or is it a form of control, wrapped up in kindness? A mother once shared during an afternoon meditation, "I love my son so much, but because I love him, I try to control everything. His friends, his phone, even his dreams. I thought I was protecting him until he started going silent around me. He began pushing me away." Her voice softened. "I never meant to hurt him, but it turns out my love was the thing he feared most." In the Buddhist teachings, the Buddha once said, "Compassion is not interference. It's the open presence of the heart, without clinging, without forcing, without control." Real love doesn't keep someone close out of worry. It trusts that they can walk their own path on their own 2 feet. In my years of teaching, especially with parents or caregivers, I've seen this over and over. They love deeply, so deeply that they confuse loving with carrying the other person's burdens. They believe that the more they worry, fix, or sacrifice, the more loving they are. But without mindfulness, that love turns heavy. The one being loved feels trapped, and the one doing the loving starts feeling hurt when things don't go their way. True love isn't attachment. It's not a constant state of worry. It's not fear of losing someone. It's being fully present without possession, caring deeply without needing to control, letting go without losing the heart. There's a Zen story about a young disciple who once asked his teacher, "Master, I love this person so much, but if I let go, won't I lose them?" The teacher just looked at him and gently replied, If you have to hold them tightly to make them stay, did they really stay at all? And if love needs to be tied down to exist, is it really love? Maybe you're in a relationship where you're constantly worrying about the other person. You feel like you need to do everything for them, decide everything for them because you care. But pause for a moment. Ask yourself, am I truly loving or am I afraid? Afraid they'll suffer? Afraid they won't need me anymore? Afraid they'll take a different path? If fear is behind your actions, then maybe it's time to let love become liberation. People don't always leave because you didn't love them enough. Sometimes they leave because you held on too tightly. When love is deep and wise, it doesn't need to hold. It gives others freedom and gives you peace. 11. Don't try to fix everything. Sometimes just being there is enough. There's something many of us have believed for a long time. When someone we love is hurting, we have to do something. Say something to make it better. Fix it. Change it. Take action. But the truth is, sometimes all that fixing just makes things more tangled. A middle-aged woman once came to the meditation hall and shared a story about her teenage daughter. The girl had grown withdrawn, quiet, anxious, emotionally closed off. Out of pure love and the instinct to protect, the mother tried everything. She found therapists, booked counseling sessions, bought books on teen psychology, wrote letters, spent hours talking. But one day, her daughter said softly, "Mom, I don't need you to fix me. I just need you to sit with me, quietly. That's enough." That's hard to hear, isn't it? Because when we care, our first instinct is always to help, to make it better. But not everything broken needs fixing. Not every pain needs to be rescued. Some pain just needs a quiet space to breathe. Some wounds just need compassionate presence, not explanations, not solutions. In Buddhist teachings, there's a beautiful word, kalyana, mitta, a spiritual friend. A spiritual friend isn't someone who always gives the perfect advice or who corrects your mistakes. They're someone who simply shows up fully with you in your moment of struggle. They don't do anything. They don't save you. They just stay, silent and steady like a mountain. And sometimes, that presence alone is the greatest anchor. Even the Buddha, after awakening, didn't rush out to preach. He simply sat under the Bodhi tree for 49 days. Still, present. His silent presence became a light for those who sought him. In my work with mature practitioners, especially those caring for loved ones who are sick or battling depression, I've seen a pattern. A deep feeling of, I have to do something to change them. And when they can't, it turns into guilt, self-blame, and quiet suffering. But the truth is, love doesn't always mean fixing. Sometimes, the one in pain doesn't need more action. They just need your presence quiet, grounded, and compassionate. One night at the monastery, a student broke down in tears after losing a loved one. No one offered advice. No one tried to comfort with words. An old monk simply sat beside them, gently placing a hand on their back. No talking, just presence. Years later, that student shared, "At that moment, I didn't need healing. I just needed someone not to leave when I was at my weakest." Life is full of things we can't fix. Some relationships won't mend. Some pain won't make sense. And sometimes, the only thing left to do is sit down together, breathe, and let silence heal what words cannot. Awakening isn't about always having the solution. It's knowing when to act and when to simply be there. Don't underestimate the power of a quiet nod, a hand on the shoulder at the right time, or just showing up without words. Some things in life can't be fixed. And maybe not fixing them is the door to peace. Let yourself become the one who is present, not the one who always feels the need to do something. 12. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means returning to the truth. One of the biggest misunderstandings about letting go is thinking it means giving up on love, giving up on effort, giving up on hope. But in Buddhist teachings, letting go doesn't mean quitting. It's not about rejecting life or running away from reality. It's about returning. Returning to the truth. The truth that everything in life, joy, pain, success, failure, is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. No one can hold on to anything without it eventually changing. There was once a middle-aged man who came to the temple feeling completely worn out. He had been clinging to a relationship that had long since ended. The other person had walked away, but inside, he still held on with hope, blame, regret, and self-torment. He asked, "Should I let go, or should I keep trying?" An elderly monk gently replied, "Look at your hand. When you grip a fistful of sand too tightly, the more you squeeze, the more you lose. But when you open your hand, the sand is still there, but it no longer hurts." Letting go doesn't mean you stop loving. It's not being cold or indifferent. It's simply letting go of the illusion that you can control everything. Many of us suffer not because we love too little, but because we love with an urge to hold, to control, to force things to turn out the way we want. And when life doesn't follow our script, we feel like we've failed. But the truth is, this world was never ours to win or lose. In the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the Buddha taught, what is impermanent is suffering. What is suffering is not self. It is not mine. It is not me. To cling to anything in life is like trying to hold onto a cloud. The moment you touch it, it dissolves. Letting go isn't falling into emptiness. It's falling back into yourself, no longer pulled by false beliefs. There's a Zen story about a young traveler who came to see an old master carrying 3 heavy backpacks, saying it was all his life's baggage. Inside were expectations, achievements, loved ones, emotions, the past, and pain. The master looked at him and asked, "If you wanted to climb a mountain, but had all that weight on your back, how would that feel?" The young man hesitated, then answered, "I'd feel exhausted, heavy, and I wouldn't be able to climb very far." The master smiled. "Then let go, not to lose anything, but so you can go farther and finally see the sky." As adults, we fear 2 things: losing and not being in control of what's ahead. But both are inescapable truths of life. If, instead of resisting, we choose to walk alongside the truth, let go of the illusion of control, let go of the expectation that things should go our way, then that's when the heart begins to lighten. Some people only truly live after they let go. Letting go of resentment, letting go of an unmet dream, letting go of a title that no longer fits, and then they can breathe. Not just with the lungs, but with the heart. In mindfulness practice, letting go isn't weakness. It's one of the most courageous acts of all, because it requires seeing the truth clearly and accepting that we cannot control the river of life. When we let go, space opens up. The heart softens. Life begins to flow naturally again. And love? It no longer becomes an attachment, but a light free from demands, free from force, free from fear. Letting go is an exhale, a pause, a gentle return to this truth. Everything is changing and I don't need to hold on anymore. And so, after all, we've reflected on together about waking up to the present moment and releasing what we can't control. maybe we come to see peace was never something we had to chase. It's always been here, in this breath, in this moment, waiting for us to be still enough to notice. Not every step on this spiritual path needs a clear answer. Sometimes it's the uncertain ones that bring us closest to what's real. And if there's one final thing to keep in your heart, maybe it's this. We weren't born to hold on to everything. We're here to learn how to love gently, to live deeply, and to let go just the right time, like a flower falling gracefully back to the earth, with no regret. If this video touched something in you, a feeling, a thought, or simply a quiet space inside, please consider subscribing to Buddhism Seeds so we can continue walking together on this path of awakening in a way that's gentle, wise, and deeply human. Feel free to like, share this video with someone who might need a little soft light for their heart. And don't forget to leave a comment below to share your reflections. Sometimes, a single line from you may be the comfort someone else is quietly searching for. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll once again sit together and listen to another life teaching unfold.